All right, welcome to our 11 a.m. session with Dan Vlahos on the Praxis management document.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this talk, and thank you to the organizers of the 2021 Nerd Summit for inviting me to participate once again this year. In particular, I'd like to thank Kelly Albrecht and Rick Hood, who did a fantastic job organizing this year's summit. Today, I'll be sharing a project that's very fresh. In fact, it just launched a day or two ago. In this presentation, the Praxis management document, I'll present a case study which is largely centered around 3 personal use cases. Along the way, I will share some contextual research, influential ideas, tools, and approaches that help shape the project. Brief introduction. My name is Dan Vlahos, for those that don't know me, and I'm an assistant professor of graphic design at Merrimack College. For over 20 years, I've worked as an interdisciplinary designer, artist, and design researcher. My work varies quite widely in scale and medium, from the architectural to the virtual. In 2017, I graduated from MassArt's Dynamic Media Institute MFA program in design. Around that time, I also accepted my first full-time professorship while simultaneously operating a Boston-based interdisciplinary design studio. The project I'm sharing today, in many ways, first started when I was asked to design an intranet portal for an architecture firm many years ago. And like any crazy idea, it just evolved from there. Today, I'll give a little background information on the project, and I'll share 10 interesting things about it while answering questions that folks might have along the way. As I entered the summer of 2020, there were primarily 3 use cases that I had in mind for my refreshed personal website. As any designer can tell you, though, one of the toughest clients to work with is actually yourself. The previous version of my website was primarily designed to attract new freelance clients, junior designers, and design partners. But my new focus on academia shifted the needs for the site entirely. As a tenure-track faculty member, those who will soon be reviewing my site and evaluating my quote work would love to see more than just projects, design projects, that is. This might include writing, presentations, videos, and more. So in August of 2020, I reached out to Spencer Sherman and his team at Facta Studio. And with their help, I narrowed the focus down to these 3 things. 1, a website for tenure. 2, a customizable start page. And 3, a dynamic media playground. Talk more about that later. Quite honestly, some studios would not have the patience to deal with a non-typical client like myself. But Spencer and his team at Facta were willing to hear me out on this, and so it began. I believe Spencer is here today. I see him there. And I'll pull him in as needed at certain points in the conversation, or feel free to put questions for him or me in the chat. We'll see here, but I was hoping that even Syed Umar, our amazingly talented developer on the project, may join us on the line as well. But he's on the other side of the world, so we shall see. I don't see him quite yet. Okay, let's continue. As to stay focused, I've organized my talk into 10 broad themes. Feel free to ask questions along the way, or for folks who helped out, feel free to chime in. So let's begin. Number 1, on the right is the shot of knollercom, which was an experimental start page designed and launched by my brother Jeff Vlahos and I in 2012. The year before, while working at the Boston-based architecture firm Shepley Bulfinch, the director of IT asked if I would design an internal start page for the employees. mostly architects of the firm. Basically, a page with links to webmail, our intranet, project management software, etc. Somehow I got quite carried away with the idea. And with the help of Jeff and others in my free time, I ended up developing a whole responsive web application based on the idea of knolling, which I will define later in the talk. While the site attracted thousands of users, sustaining it became quite a chore. Jeff and I wound the Knoller project down in 2019, but there were some components and ideas that at some point we very much hope to recycle. So at Right is a 4-step guide to knolling, which is a relatively obscure term which describes the act of, quote, grouping and arranging objects. As far as we know, the first person to quote knoll was Andrew Kromelow, a janitor at the now famous architect Frank Gehry's furniture store in Los Angeles. At the time, Gehry was designing for the American modern furniture brand Knoll, a design house whose furniture was known for its angular forms. At the end of his workdays, Kromelow would go through the store and find any tools that had been left out. He would then rearrange the tools on a flat surface so that they were at right angles to one another. He called this act knolling. He invented this term because it reminded him of the angles of Florence Knoll's furniture pieces. And thus, Sachs popularized, or at least made known, the expression, always be knolling. On this slide is a screenshot of my previous website, which was first launched in 2014. It was a quite simple idea, actually, and rather fun concept. I physically framed a bunch of my work, mounted it on my studio wall, photographed it, and then, with the help of my brother Jeff, used the photo as the main image on my homepage. We coded the page such that the user could hover over a work, which would then highlight it, and then the user could select it to learn more about the project. The website helped me launch a successful studio practice, which continues to this day. However, about 4 years ago, the space that was my old studio seen on the website in Boston was renovated into a bedroom for my 6-year-old son, Miles. And there were other issues. When I wanted to add new projects, I actually resorted to digitally stripping them into the shot using Photoshop. The problem was that I had dozens of new projects to show, and there was no more room to show them in this format. I needed a more flexible solution. In the summer of 2020, I began chipping away at the idea of merging some of the ideas from Knoller with the needs I saw in a new website. Again, as a tenure-track professor teaching design, I wondered if the site could in some way allow me to showcase other kinds of work as well, writing and research, videos, and perhaps later on student work as well. On the right is the website of my dear design colleague from MassArt, Professor Martha Radig. Radig is also a graduate of the Dynamic Media Institute, and like myself is both a teacher, researcher, and practitioner. And yet her website is in many ways similar to my own previous site. It provides the information, but it provides little control to the visitor to find exactly what they want to see. There's no sorting, no filtering, or ordering, and little hierarchy is provided beyond the project image and the title. This format is extremely common in the design world. Many a designer have their work lost in a sea of Adobe Behance pages, and soon the questions continued to mount. Professor Radig and I both hold advanced degrees in dynamic media, and yet, why are our websites so very static? Are there not better tools or templates that we could build upon? If users prefer sorting and filtering results on shopping sites, why don't I provide my visitors with the same benefits? On the left is a screenshot of the Boston Globe website, which, as many of you know, is viewed as one of the first large-scale implementations of responsive design anywhere. The site was developed in 2011 by the Boston-based studio Upstatement in a collaboration with Filament Group and Ethan Marcotte, whom, as many of you are likely aware, was a prominent leader in the responsive design movement. As an aside, and perhaps as luck would have it, my brother Jeff started an internship at Upstatement around the same time that they were working on the site. And as another aside, Jeff gambled and left Upstatement to join the Boston-based startup PillPack in 2015, which was purchased by Amazon in 2018. Alas, I digress. As I began to formulate a design approach for my new site, I really focused on design tropes from the worlds of editorial and e-commerce design. The media flexibility and captioning of editorial paired with the utility of e-commerce, a quote, shopping site for ideas, if you will. On the left is a screenshot of Jessica Ivins' 2019 article, An Essential Tool for Capturing Your Career Accomplishments, which was published on A List Apart, which is, as many of you know, a website for people who make websites. In the article, she describes the idea of, quote, a career management document, or what in detail she defines as, quote, a comprehensive collection of your resume and portfolio content. And on the right is Daniel H. Pink's groundbreaking book, A Whole New Mind, from 2005. In his book, Pink argued that the 21st century belongs to a different kind of person with a different kind of mind. Artists, inventors, storytellers, creative and holistic, quote, right brain thinkers. Fortunately, for creative folks like me, Pink's research has, in my view, quickly become a reality. Both design and creative thinking are now being added to the curricula in leading Master of Business programs around the world. Building on several of Jessica Ivins' points in her A List Apart article, the old school concept of a resume is far too static for a workforce that is now increasingly project-based, nimble, and creative. Let's talk about Praxis. On the right of the slide is a screenshot of my new homepage, a sortable and filterable mix of spaces, books, products, graphics, research, videos, ideas, and initiatives. So what is Praxis? Like Knowling, the word is a bit obscure, but it is much older. Praxis is described as a process by which a theory, lesson, or skill is enacted, embodied, or realized, largely through action. Praxis may also refer to the act of engaging, applying, exercising, realizing, or practicing ideas. In contemporary pedagogy, praxis is sometimes used as a proxy for experiential learning, or what is more commonly understood as learning by doing. Praxis has been a recurrent topic in the field of philosophy and is found in the writings of Plato, Aristotle, St. Augustine, and others. As an aside, it is perhaps fitting that I am now teaching at Merrimack College, which is in fact an Augustinian institution founded in the tradition of St. Augustine. Getting back to the matter at hand with this web project, I initially viewed the new site as a way of playing off of Ivan's article and, quote, making it real, a dynamic career management document of sorts. But here again, even the word career does not seem appropriate, nor is it emblematic of 21st century work, at least the kind of roles that Daniel H. Pink signifies. Along with the homepage, which features sortable categories of work such as research, interaction design, etc., the new site even provides the meta user or owner, me in this case, with the opportunity to create a personalized homepage as is seen in this screenshot. And much like the homepage, this start page, if you will, can be filtered by owner-generated categories. Owners can add images, photos, videos, and even dynamic widgets placed within iframes. For widgets, we carried over 4 that were originally created for the Knoller project: a calculator, a calendar, a weather widget, and a cool little clock. Several of these widgets were designed for Knoller by the Brooklyn-based studio Oak, and some of them were designed by my brother Jeff. Surely there will be more to come. A pandemic project with old school tools. The last quirky thing I would like to share with you all is the fact that I designed the mock-ups of the site to near pixel perfect scale using Adobe InDesign. As a design educator, I am fully aware that there are many better and or more fluid ways to design a website these days, rather than to use a layout tool originally designed for print in the late 1990s. Here again, Facta Studio did not flinch at the idea. And in fact, Syed, the developer I worked with at Facta, totally rolled with it. And so, if I may digress once more, the amazing thing that happened this summer was that I helped design a house, a website, a book, and an exhibit, all using InDesign. And in each case, the projects were done in collaboration with others. As legend has it, Upstatement actually used InDesign as the layout tool when it redesigned the Boston Globe website. So I suppose I am not alone. One minor thing to note for those who may want to give this approach a shot. By default, InDesign now shows you on screen the calculated size of your layout as if it were in the physical world. Thus, even when pixels are set as the unit of measurement, a pixel is not actually scaled to a pixel. It's kind of strange, right? Luckily, I found a wonderful script created by Michael Staniland, which provides you with the ability to change InDesign's default screen resolution between web and print as needed. This is all just to say, I very much enjoyed working on this project with Facta. Mostly, I appreciated the team's willingness to experiment and try new things. I should also note that I'll provide a link to this presentation in the chat. And there are links to even the script and other things that I mentioned in the talk. So those are the 10 things, but just to kind of summarize it and talk about what is next. The next steps. Well, let's start with the obvious. These days at the tail end, let's hope, of a pandemic, number one is just staying healthy. And for those that join me today, I wish the same to you and your families and friends. Number two, for the website project, well, it's very fresh. So getting the bugs out and working out the kinks, I'm sure there are many, but I look forward to working through that. That said, surprisingly, it's working quite well, considering it's a day or two old. Number three, this is on me. I've got lots of exciting new projects that I would like to add. I have to work on curating the site, editing the text, etc. So that might give me some stuff to work on this summer for sure. I would like to add another page for student work now that I'm doing more teaching. I think it would be nice to selectively pick projects that my students have worked on and showcase them in a similar manner, where then the visitor of the site could again sort through them and see different types of work that design students are producing in my classes. Number 5, this is quite intriguing. We had talked early on, Facta, myself, and all those involved about not only, if I go through all this effort and what will probably end up being a year's worth of work between all of us, developing this as a template or tool for this specific use case, those that want to show a range of interdisciplinary work in a kind of more flexible manner. The idea always was perhaps then at some point we could open up and share it for others that might want to use it. We haven't talked about exactly how yet, but I think that would make sense. In general, if you can forgive me for saying so, developers are very good at sharing their efforts with their community. Designers, sometimes not so much. Sometimes we kind of keep things to ourselves a little too much. So excited for that. And if anybody's interested in that, we'd be happy to talk to you. Number 6 is start page widgets for designers and coders. I think, with any project like this, if you're going to open it up, you have to know who your audience might be. I think, I mentioned Professor Radig earlier in the talk, community of designers and developers who are interested in the web and perhaps are teaching, researching, doing interdisciplinary work. I think that would be a good audience. And we could then develop more tools for, let's say, our start page that would cater specifically to them. That I think that could be a lot of fun. Number 7, and this is where I could perhaps even get my students involved, is this idea of maybe developing some experimental widgets. Like, just as this launched, I'm thinking, what if some of them flipped or looped, or on the homepage, you could have a player for music or your favorite radio station. So I haven't even delved into that, but I think that could be a lot of fun. And as I suggest, a way for me to use that as almost a little educational tool for students to create very basic websites with singular or very limited functions. And last, if I can selfishly mention that at Merrimack College, where I teach, within the graphic design program, we are launching a new concentration in interaction design. That's really cool. I do a range of work, but interaction design is one segment within graphic design that I think is certainly not going to go away. It's only going to grow. It's only going to be more interesting over time. I can say I could never have imagined I would be designing for these mediums like mobile apps and websites with the level of interactivity that we have today. So who knows what the future looks like, but I'm excited to be working with students to imagine what that might look like, provide education for them. So with that, thank you so much for joining me today. We can pull up the site and look at it together. We can answer questions and or just have a conversation for those that were involved. So thank you so much for attending. My information is here. I'll place a link to the presentation in the chat, and happy to answer questions. Spencer, did I miss anything, or is there anything you would like to add?
Well, Jess just submitted a question in the chat there if you want if you
Oh,
see
okay,
that.
yeah, thank you.
But yeah, I'd like to add a couple things too, but maybe address that first.
Okay, from Jess, it's interesting to see the evolution of how you have grouped and displayed your work. Curious what kind of user feedback you've gotten. How are people using the site? Jess, that's a really great question. So, the site actually just went public maybe about 24 hours ago. So it's very, very fresh. And I have to admit that, and this is on me, not Facta at all, I was in charge of populating the content. I put in enough so that we could get it launched, mostly my older work from the previous site, so I didn't have to do much in the way of new writing right now, and hold off on that to the summer. But I would love to get feedback, especially from folks, like we mentioned earlier in the presentation, that might be interested in building upon this. Other design professors who might be in the same use case going up for tenure need to showcase their CV, if you will, but in a more dynamic or interactive manner. And also just things that we might have missed or didn't consider. And I'm sure that there's a lot there. So did that answer the question, Jess?
One other quick thing to point out, I think that would be interesting, Dan, is that to track like the interactive engagement, which isn't going to be defaultly tracked if we were to just throw Google Analytics on there or something, like
Yeah.
what people are actually clicking on, that might get lost because a lot of it's dynamic, but it would be an interesting like next step implementation, some event tracking or something like that. Because I suspect, if they visit the actual project page, of course, we'll see that. But if they're just filtering and stuff, it'd be kind of interesting to know what they're doing there.
You could even do heat mapping.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be
Yeah.
awesome. Like, I like that visual. It means a lot more.
Since I'm one of just a handful of folks, I figured I'd say hi and introduce myself. I'm Tom Murrell. Dan, it's nice meeting you. I'm the designer at Common Media, who's one of the shops that's involved with the nerd thing. And I've been working with Spencer lately too, and the fact that guys on some projects, the
Oh,
team
cool.
over there is, they're doing some really amazing work for us. So it's been certainly satisfying to see the range of stuff that that's coming through here. I was curious if you could talk a little bit more about what you're planning to do with the student work component and sort of how you see that integrating as a piece of the sort of tenure review part of the function of the site, that it's a portfolio in that way. But also, since it's just such a different type of content, right? It's not work you did, it's work that you were critiquing and leading and assigning, and all of the roles you have as an instructor that are so different. So if you've got any sort of vision or thoughts about that, I'd be really interested to hear that.
Yeah, I'm sure Spencer might have some ideas too, but I brought up you guys can see now the site as it was recently launched. And so right now it's just showing all of my work by default on the homepage. If you, let's see, go to the navigation at the top, very limited main kind of sections, just the homepage and about page and the start page, like I mentioned before. A lot of times what you see actually is design professors like myself will just sort of lump together their student work and their own work. And one of the things I find sort of confusing and frustrating is you visit those pages, and it's tough to actually understand what is student work and what is the work of the professor or designer, or what it's a collaboration between the two. So you actually ask a good question. I think my instinct with the student work is to do a totally separate section that will say student work. And within that section, allow the user to sort between the different types of work that my students are doing. And I think that's probably the cleanest way to approach it. I don't know, Spencer, you might have some other ideas, but over time, I could see just every semester adding like 2 or 3 new student projects to it, and they're just, start to grow.
That'd be an interesting challenge for the student, is that you give them this little section, right, on your site, and they've got to make something that's going to fit in it. And if it's an iframe, they have to basically make it be self-sufficient on its own, and you just drop it in there. And it would have like its own feature page too. But yeah, I think I just say that a lot of the focus was, also on the back end to make sure that it is easy to add new projects for both you, Dan, or even I could give the keys to someone who with controlled access to be able to add content to, and just to make that intuitive. So I think that was a big part. I mean, because I feel like, you could get good portfolio websites, right? That could even be like a Squarespace site or something. But you mentioned the rigidity of Martha's website and how it doesn't really have the flexibility that she wants. And that was a big focus for us, was, pare back what we do, showcase the work, but then also make it easy for you to add and sustain it and kind of grow or evolve in whatever direction it goes. And the student thing is a really cool one.
Yeah, I think, I have 2 things in mind. The first is like, I have very typical design projects for my students, which are like, design a logo for a nonprofit. And sometimes they do some really nice stuff. And certainly I'd love to show that, help them promote their work, and start to think about how to show it. But then, like Spencer says, is like, since I'm increasingly teaching, dynamic media projects, having them, doing projects where I ask them to create something like this calculator, like a very basic functioning little web app. And that, I think this is super cool. We could show that, within an iframe. So it's like a little mini interactive project within however many pixels we're dealing with, like 500 pixels by like 300. And that's super cool. These are really neat. This is the calculator designed by Oak Studios in Brooklyn. They're doing really cool work in their own right. So that's the other thing, is like, we could get other people involved to do these little widgets, or students. So I think this has got me really excited about the possibilities it offers, because it's so kind of flexible, at least for kind of the needs that I'm looking for. You can see on my homepage, selfishly showing my family photo from last year. I just, I know it's really quirky, and this even idea of a start page is also old school, if you will. But, I thought about this, and it's sort of intriguing to me that, like, you could even public start page, which tells people something about you, right? Like, I haven't gone through and really populated this fully yet, but, for folks to know that, WGBH and the New York Times are like the places I go to for information, that, you can show your family the tools you use, the kinds of resources that might be of interest to you. That in itself is like an intriguing idea that we saw, so early on in the world of web in general. If you guys are a little older, like Yahoo sites and stuff like that, where people would more publicly share their kind of the things across the web that they connect to.
Sure.
So in some ways, I'm kind of bringing that idea back as well.
Visitor count at the bottom.
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, really. Would it be out of line for me to ask Spencer to give us the 30-second architecture?
Yeah, no, that's
rundown, if you'd be willing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think so. From the onset, trying to think of ways to keep it open source so that it could be shared. That was a big challenge for this. And I think as a next step, we're not quite there yet, but it's close. So open source, of course, WordPress, customized sort of blank theme built on the foundation framework. And then from there, the most sophisticated thing is this Ajax filtering that you're seeing, which is that dynamic filter. And I would say like one of the tensions with open source stuff is that like who's going to maintain it after it gets out into the wild, right? So you could build a Ajax search with WordPress. The concern being that WordPress changes, the search breaks.
Yeah.
You know, so that was where we used Facet WP, which is just a great little plugin for dynamic search, and we just they're going to continue to update and support it. Whereas it plugs into WordPress in a really elegant way, where just by publishing a post, it's going to re-index the faceted search. It's pretty sophisticated stuff that would be tricky to do from scratch, and even if we did, it would sort of be a snapshot in time of what works this month in 2021. So that would be kind of a cool thing to explore, Dan, is everything else, you give it away, it's free. The plugin people would have to buy, that would not be open source, and that would be something to consider. But that's pretty much the gist of it. It's kind of pare everything back and let the work, just showcase the work that Dan's done.
Nice.
Yeah, I know, like early on, we didn't get deep into this, but I basically said, even if it was some template, or, it's, I'm not looking to broadcast this out to, or sell this to a bazillion people. But for a small community that comes to us with the same kind of problem, maybe it's just as simple as directing them to Spencer and his team, and they've sort of already solved the problem, and they can just sort of, for a small set of people, continue to kind of evolve it over time. And I think that would be really nice.
Definitely, yeah, and just like that, we talked about what like a Git repo, people could just grab it. If you truly want to share it, just public like that. I feel like in that README, it would be like, install this theme and then buy this plugin for now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, sharing it, I think that's a really cool, that's pretty different for us. We don't often get a project where the end goal is to then just like give it away, to colleagues and stuff. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, or even, other folks who are teaching interaction design, if they, take on this idea of having their students do these little widgets, we could build a little library of them. So there could be like a little community around folks who make these things. So I think it could be cool to open it up. And I don't know, yeah, Spencer, we're going to talk about the timing and stuff for that. But I think, yeah, in general, really, really happy with how this project came together. And I stated this in my talk, the willingness of Factor in their team to sort of iterate and prototype. And like, I have to confess, when I came to Spencer, the idea was not really clear, right? I think this is a wonderful quality of a team that if you can work with your clients to help steer them into a really focused direction, that's of huge value. And half jokingly, I said, this is like kind of a wild idea initially, but it ended up in a really kind of simple form. And I really kind of appreciate that kind of direction. So thank you, Sherman, to that. And Syed's not here, but I have to just say, because I know this is going to be recorded and he'll probably watch it. This guy was phenomenal, and for a client working in Boston to post like, an edit or a thought or an idea before I go to bed at like, 11 o'clock at night, and then to wake up the next morning and it's done and done well. And, clearly communicated. He's a good writer as well. That's really important, to be able to communicate, not just kind of do the work. So Syed, I know you're going to watch this. Thank you so much for all your help. Look forward to doing more on this.
All right, Dan, thank you so much. I put a link in the Slack for the Orange Room with your slides, and
Great.
I'm going to stop recording.
Thank you, guys.